Welcome to episode 163 of the 3% Podcast. This is Chad Post from Open Letter Books, and I'm joined as always by Tom Roberge of Riff Raff.
Hello?
I'm slurring my words this morning.
That's all right. Feels a little weird not to have somebody else here this time, but
I know, it's fun having other people on, like, to talk and bounce things off of, but ironically, we have a lot of things to talk about this week.
yeah, I mean, a lot of them, I guess, unfortunately, financially related, but
Yeah.
it is a business after all.
I do want to take 1 second though and to thank Javier and Tom Flynn and everyone from Chicago for helping make our independent press rep night on Sunday really successful. There's a huge turnout, lots of great conversations, books, people. It was really fun. So thank them for setting that all up, and for everyone who came. Like Adam and Ashley came from Transit, Dan from Biblioasis. Emily Cook was there. There were people from Catapult, Counterpoint. So it was a really nice evening.
It seems crazy to me that they would fly from Oakland to do that, but
It's like 50 people were registered for the 50 booksellers, and that's a pretty significant number.
I guess. I mean, I guess that's, about as useful as like a spread out sort of thing at Winter Institute or something. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they wanted to go to Chicago because we all went to a Cubs-Mets game, which was very wild. The Wrigley Field staff gets an F on every level for having bad information, contradictory information, being unhelpful generally, and just sucking. But the game itself was great up until I kept telling Javier that they needed to pull Seth Lugo before he pitched to Javier Baez unless he was going to throw 4 pitches in the dirt, or else he was going to give up a home run, and they promptly gave up a home run. And then your manager got in a fight with a beat reporter, and Jason Vargas threatened to kick his ass. All happened at that game.
yes, you are definitely in the weeds with our listeners here.
That's
So
fine. That is fine. But they wanted to come to the Cubs game too, and then we got to do the independent rep night. So it's like a two-for sort of thing. Tourism plus business.
all right.
Anything
You
new
wanted to
there
start-
before we jump into this?
Say that?
Anything new with you before we jump into the actual topics?
No, not really. Just day by day at the store. That's all I can report.
So the thing we wanted to start with, I think, was this letter that went out yesterday, 2 days ago, not sure when, from Chris Doeblin at Book Culture to members, patrons, everyone that he could send it to. And it's a really long letter, and I don't know that I really want to read the whole thing, but basically,
No, please don't.
though I'm trying to find there's a couple things I'm super confused about. So like here's some data that's actually useful for framing it. Book culture stores generate over $650,000 in sales tax revenue each year for the city and state. We employ over 75 people at peak season and had a payroll over $1.7 million last year. Book Culture has always been committed to paying our employees above minimum wage, both before and after the increase. All that payroll, along with the $700,000 a year that we pay in rent, goes right back into the New York economy, which is why I address our government here. Many large development plans, Amazon's headquarters too in Long Island City, for example, included a cost to taxpayers of $48,000 per job. There's a history here of local government aiding businesses when it produces a return for the locality. Goes on about how all the money goes back into there, so on and so forth. It's so long. There's a complaint about how the families that own America's 2 largest retailers, Amazon and Walmart, just 2 families have accumulated over $250 billion in privately held wealth. And that inequity, if each of those families only had $1 billion, they could have spent $2 million for every single public school in America, which I feel is less of a good data stat than it should be, because I don't know how many single public schools there are. But then the part that confuses me is the ending, where it just says, we need financial help to continue our transition. I'm not sure if there's a part where he references the transition.
I think it's the very beginning where he talks about the increase in minimum wage.
Oh, the increase in minimum wage is the transition. Okay. And that gets lost because this is literally, I can't even guess, like 5,000 words long. I can't get to the bottom again. Okay. We need financial help to continue our transition. If you run the city or the state, or if you have the means to assist, or even if it simply means calling and emailing and writing to the local city council member where you live and the mayor and governor, please do so. The price of doing business doesn't have to be incurred by the people. The price of doing business should be more about serving our common welfare. And this was echoed in something I found on their Twitter feed that I was very confused by. So it says, so on their Twitter feed, they've posted a letter and then they put, so how can you help? We're not going to do a crowdfunding campaign or anything like that. We ask that, if possible, you write to the city council, mayor, or governor. We even have a letter writing desk in 2 of our stores. Help us make our case for a continued existence. But I don't know what they want. Do you understand what they want? Like, what are these letters supposed to be saying?
That's the thing that I don't understand. Like, do they want a tax break the way that Amazon gets these things? But it's really unclear. Like, where does it say here? Continued existence. Like, what does that mean? Like,
I know. Yeah, like, dear Governor Cuomo, please continue book culture's existence. Thank you, Chad Post.
Like, do they want a buyout? Like, do they want money with help with their debt? I don't know. Like a loan, like a very low interest loan. It's very unclear exactly. They're looking. It says that they were looking for investment.
Yes, but
the city or state does not invest in private business.
No,
not in this direct way.
No.
So what they do is give tax breaks and whatever. There are various, grants they can apply for, but generally those are low interest loans instead of investments. So I don't know. Maybe that's what he's looking for. I don't know. It's very unclear.
Unless they're changing to like a nonprofit, in which there would be some more logic, maybe. But
sure.
That doesn't seem to be, that transition doesn't, there's no reference to that.
No.
I read this and I was like, I don't get it. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And as a result, I'm just not sure how to feel about it. Like, it makes me feel like they're in worse situation than they should be with 4 stores and the one that's doing really well in Long Island City and all that. Like, I don't know. Just it's a weird email or weird messaging.
Yeah, I mean, it says up here, like you said, there's a history of local government aiding businesses when it produces a return for the locality.
Is there?
I don't quite know what that means.
I feel like if they had made it more direct, more people might be willing to like help out. Instead of I'm on a message listserv of people who are like, I don't know, they self-declared disruptors of the publishing network, and they I don't think are super high on this thing. And I feel like if there had been a better system of messaging, it might have played out better for them.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like I understand the sentiment that he's writing about, in that, it's very frustrating to watch these large corporations get all these tax breaks and Amazon doesn't pay tax every year and all of that sort of bullshit, which is all justifiably true. And it certainly seems like the government not just serves big corporations, but sort of exists only to serve large corporations.
Yeah.
And that there's not really a mechanism for smaller businesses to sort of get some of those same benefits. That part of it is, and part of my frustration and confusion with this argument, even though I do believe that that government, and if it's going to do these sorts of things, should do them fairly and equitably across the board. I don't know what that means exactly.
Yeah.
Like 75 employees compared to however many thousands Amazon will employ is not really, it's hard to make an argument based on that. The other argument is, like, he's blurring the lines between like small business and arts and literary culture value, which are separate things.
Yeah.
In government. Like, the government funds arts projects and funds these things, but those are public goods, and they're often nonprofit forms of those public goods. And then there's businesses, which let us not forget that owning a bookstore is a business, is a retail business. And so trying to like gin up the cultural aspect in order to get some financial benefit, it just gets really blurry. That's the problem.
Yeah, because like those, what you're saying, like when the government funds things, it's generally creative activity, like the creation of the thing that then the retail business can sell, and if it's related to books, or if it's like artworks, public artworks, those are creative activities, the things that enhance like the community through that. And I understand the argument for a local bookstore, enhancing the community. That's pretty much a given for anyone listening to this podcast. Anyone listening, but I don't know how that segues with this idea of getting continuing their existence through some letter writing campaign of I don't even know, murky benefits, murky message.
Yeah. Which is not to say that he doesn't have an argument. I just think it needs to be. I wish he had asked for something very specific.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
That's all. That's it. That's my advice. Ask for something specific.
Tell us what to do.
Yeah.
Like directly. Like even including like the names and addresses of the people to write to would have been helpful. Like as a simple thing, like we could just click on a thing and email someone with like a set message. Be like, I could do that, but like I'm not gonna go look up how to send a fucking letter to the mayor. I'm sure as hell not gonna go write one.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a little bit of that. It's also, I think if he had been specific in terms of what he was looking for, some of these people might have been more readily, eager to respond directly.
Yeah.
In some way, even if it's behind closed doors, like maybe not the mayor, but some of these other local representatives and city council members definitely might have reached out,
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't
know. So I guess the other thing that ties into this, and I don't know where exactly I got on this list from. Must have been something, I don't know, some new-ish newsletter called the Book Diaries. It's issue number 4, and I guess this is basically a week-long. Each week there's a new diary from a bookseller employee of an independent publisher that's anonymous, explaining their firsthand experience, how little money they have. Am I got that right?
Yes. I'm trying to find it here. Okay. Yeah.
And it says here's a small opportunity to share how you deal with your measly pittance of a salary and maybe inspire other people to adopt similar habits, or maybe it'll be a cautionary tale. Who knows? Also, it's just fun to see how people spend their days and their money. And so, do you have anything?
All right. So the first one here is a 23-year-old. It said part-time, but 4 to 5 days a week at 8 hours a day adds up to full-time. $12 an hour, which is minimum wage in Chicago, no benefits, which basically translates to what is indicated here as a biweekly paycheck of between $400 and $700.
So that's why I think that the part-time is that maybe these are that's a maximum of 8 hours a day, 4 to 5 days a week, and because otherwise that number would be static.
Right. And so it goes through, I'm not going to read this, but it goes through this bookseller's daily costs, and, it's not just a line item sort of thing of costs. It's an explanation of why there's certainly a bit of focus put on the thought behind each purchase. If money is tight, then, there are more thoughts to these things. And a sort of general explanation of how they feel about money, period, and job and social sort of issues surrounding who has money and who doesn't, and all those sorts of things. I don't know. I got bored with the diary aspect of it very quickly. I personally do not find it fun to see how people spend their days and their money.
Nope.
Just really, it's just too much information about a stranger that I just don't need. And even though this is anonymous, I would never in a million years do this about myself. I just couldn't.
Bookseller, 42 years old, Providence, Rhode Island. I wonder who that could be.
Right. Well, I'm not an employee, so there's that.
Fair. But
although I did the math on this recently. I make less than $12 an hour.
Really? Oh, God. If you count all the hours that you're doing, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, and that's currently. I'm not trying to say hey, I pay my employees more than I pay me. There are clearly benefits to being the owner and not the employee hourly wage earner.
Would you like me to write a letter to the governor?
Yes.
Okay. Just checking.
All right. So we brought this up only because I do think it relates a little bit to the letter we just read from, a bookstore owner to a bunch of patrons and various political officials sort of explaining how even what is considered a successful store is about to run out of money and have to close its doors. I do think it was interesting. Chris didn't quite, he didn't throw his employees under the bus. He didn't complain about the rise in minimum wage. He didn't do any of that sort of stuff.
No, yeah, that's a
But
very
he
good
very
point.
easily could have, and which, to my never-ending sort of disgust, booksellers do, bookstore owners do all the time at the conferences. I think they're understanding that it's maybe not a good look, and maybe they're not being empathetic. But it's hard. It's difficult to talk about that sort of specific issue without coming off as like, Scrooge McDuck. And
Yeah.
I do think they're finally understanding that they need to be really sensitive about the way these things are discussed, and that like these things are like this rise in minimum wage is for a reason, right?
Right.
Anyway, it's interesting that even with $12 an hour in Chicago, I mean, this bookseller's rent is $500, which
Yeah.
that's cheap.
Yeah.
Um,
Even if it's like to split with
Yeah.
someone else or whatever, but still, nevertheless.
That's pretty cheap.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, I don't know. It's weird. It is interesting in a way to see that this bookseller in particular has made certain decisions that impact their budget sort of choices, but that they still, it's still like week to week, day to day sort of a struggle. Again, it's some of this is self-imposed, but it's interesting that like there's no freedom beyond that. Like
Yeah.
even making that decision to be frugal about X in order to do Y, like there's still so little extra. There's so little room to get more. Like it's very hard to subsist on this. And I do think it's interesting that this bookseller like never once complains about the work or complains
No.
about, had to read this or, any of the job aspects of it, which I guess is a good thing. I don't know. Like, I feel like, I mean, I guess I never complained about being a bookseller apart from like, customers are the worst. When I was just working at McNally Jackson, like
Yeah.
the work itself was fantastic. I don't know. It didn't seem frustrating. I don't know. I'm having a hard time like understanding the takeaway from this other than like sort of illuminating the fact, maybe this is the point, illuminating just how difficult it is to survive on $12 an hour.
Right. It's in a way like not having the bookstore part of it is beneficial, or maybe not, because I don't think anyone outside of bookstores or publishers are subscribed to this thing. But if you did anyone's minimum wage and just tore it down to the studs, like it's gonna look real. Like it's gonna look like this. It's gonna be choice after choice after choice of like very small amounts of money that are seemingly very precarious purchases. And imagine if you add on like any children or anything else to it, and then you get these horror stories. And like maybe the overall takeaway is that our system is so fundamentally broken that minimum wage is nonsense, and that there's something more that needs to be done to allow people to have like a living wage or living sensibility. Because you can't. This doesn't feel. I mean, they're not unhappy, like you say. They don't complain about stuff, but it doesn't feel very good if like you're restricted by the fact that you have to pay $60 a month for your therapy, and so you can't get a coffee. Like that feels like a shitty way to exist.
It really showcases just how like stuck people get in this way of life because they're unable to save and unable to sort of do things that would enable them to like move up and make more money. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah, with the counter argument that how was this person 23, 24?
yeah.
I mean, I remember those days and being like in this exact same thing, but then, every little job shift, every little increase, everything became monumental and was good and was like part of the like the reason I'm able to not reason I'm not a bookseller anymore, but also like as part of that. Like that, I loved those years are fine, and that struggle was real, but like but then it went away after a time.
Yeah, of course. Like, I remember making
Ours was $6.25, dude. $6.25.
well, yeah, okay. In 2005 in New York City, I started at $11 an hour at
Right.
McNally. So, yeah, that was not bad. But that was also 14 years ago. So,
Yeah.
and yeah, I was working 6 days a week,
Yep.
between two jobs, and that's just what it is. And I don't mean to like say like, hey, all you youngins, like,
Right.
you had it worse and do all that. It's just, it's part of being young. It really is. And, these are entry level. There's a structure to these things, and entry level jobs are entry level jobs. What's unfortunate, I think, is the student debt aspect of the
Yeah.
younger generation is very different than it was.
Absolutely.
Like the cost of education has skyrocketed to such an unbelievable degree that these people are going to be paying it off forever. Whereas mine was, under $10,000.
Yep. Same.
So
Same. Yeah, I
state
know.
schools back in the day, it was cheap, and
And that's how the
it's
system was set up for that.
right. And all of this to illustrate the fact that everything is complicated. It's all so interconnected. School costs, medical costs, all of these things, housing costs, all are going up, and the living wages are not keeping up,
Nope.
keeping pace at all. And it's a very serious failing on the part of governments to address this.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know exactly what the right plan is, but there's got to be ways to make this work. And we could talk about that forever, but
Yeah, no, exactly.
get way
Socialism, I don't
off. New brand socialism.
Yeah.
Socialism that's kind of socialism. Yeah, lots of like all the taxing of stock transactions is one I've been on about for like 10 years, and apparently that's like the fundamental part of the student loan erasure, or whatever you want to call it, forgiveness, or the elimination of the student loan stuff is the taxing of the stock exchange transactions, which I think has been a great. That was an idea from a long time ago that people have bannered around that I always thought would be miraculous.
Yeah, that's a strange one that is like a no-brainer. It doesn't
Yeah.
it seems strange. Yeah.
Seems like nobody should be like, yeah, rich people should just not get this like 0.005 cent tax when they exchange like 20,000 shares of one company so they can make $1 million.
Right. Yeah.
Like, yeah, tax them. Use that money for education. There, problem solved. Jesus. But yeah, hopefully, maybe by 2024 we'll be lucky. Anyway, so finances for booksellers are complicated. Finances for bookstore owners are complicated. And then there's human rights for translators. So you're going to be talking about this mostly, but there's a new e-zine, as they called it, Counterpoint. And it is from an organization that has a really rough abbreviation. It's the European Council of Literary Translators Associations, which is CETL.
Sure.
I guess.
Seattle.
Seattle is better. Seattle. I'll go with that. But they are doing a magazine about, I don't know, anything related to translation stuff from mostly all European countries and perspectives. And in this first issue that they released last week, they have a article from Morton Visby, who I believe is the president of Seattle, they wrote a thing called Human Rights for Translators, ? And you brought this up and mentioned it, and I want to hear what your take on this is, because it was above my head.
So I've read this several times trying to make sense of it, because I'll be honest here. My gut reaction to this is, wow, that is an incorrect appropriation of the term human rights. It seems offensive to people who are struggling to live, and period. People whose lives are at risk.
Yep.
And to me, if you read the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which I read this morning, in fact, you have to get all the way down to Article 19 to get to the thing about freedom of expression and all that. Whereas the first 10 are about everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. No one shall be held in slavery. No one shall be subjected to torture.
Yeah. These are important things.
These are the things. Okay. I have a dear friend who works for Human Rights Watch. I can tell you they're not doing anything involving translators from Russian to Belgian
No.
in terms of exploring the violations of their human rights. Like, it just seems like really self-important
Yeah.
to even suggest this sort of thing using the term human rights. That's all. I am not saying that these issues aren't of interest. I just think maybe they should have dialed back the gravity of the language they chose to express them with. So basically, all right, he gives a little preamble here and explains that they had a meeting and all of the delegates put forth a mandate to the board to draft a, quote, declaration on the human rights of literary translators. He goes on to explain that although it seems fairly obvious, that it's actually incredibly complicated, which, yeah, of course it is, because you're not actually writing anything, and I'm using that term loosely. Mm-hmm. You're translating something, and the freedom of speech is complicated when you look at it through that lens, right?
Yeah.
None of which I'm going to get into. He asks a lot of like hypothetical questions, or like just, here are some questions for the sake of being asked. Like, which kind of freedom is at stake when it comes to freedom of speech for literary translators? Do we as translators derive our freedom of speech from the original author? They get increasingly complex and sort of nebulous. As he goes on. He says,
couple ridiculous ones too.
While literary translators do have an authorial command of their own writing, they are also, of course, subject to an editing and publication process that few translators would claim or even wish to control autonomously. Is that censorship? Censorship.
There we go. Yeah.
So then he says, how can we pinpoint where the translator's own right to undiluted articulation of freedom and free of censorship and fear becomes distinct? Yeah. So.
Well, that next part is the part that I really got hung up on. And right after that question, and seeing that book market dynamics and cultural policies often have limiting consequences on the actual possibility of translating the literary voices you want to make heard, we could also ask ourselves whether this constitutes a violation of our right to express ourselves as literary translators, which seemed like, wait a second, no, you can just translate anything. Whether it gets published or not is a different story. That's not a censorship or a violation of any of your rights. That's weird.
Yeah. So, and then he actually goes on and like says, we're working on it, but we haven't really come to any conclusions yet.
Good job.
And basically saying like, if we don't take this up, no one else is.
Yeah.
So it's one of these things that like at first glance you're just like, wow, this is really a self-important sort of thing. I guess what my question is, and I'm partly like, look, we don't live in a country where, partly because the government just doesn't give a shit about what gets translated into English.
Exactly.
At least not anymore. It's hard to imagine a scenario in which any of this would apply to anyone we know in America.
Right.
I would like an example. I would like someone to tell me, like, hey, I'm a translator from, let's say, Russian to like a former Soviet republic.
Okay. I have an example for you. So when Wang translated a book called The Corpse Walker or Corpse Wash, it's not Corpse Washer. There's two books that are very similar in name, but it was by a Chinese dissident. I think that as a result of translating that into English, his status in China is not secure.
So he's been sort of accused of abetting something that the government doesn't like.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that there would be examples of that. I could see, even if you're an English to Chinese translator, translating, or say English to North Korean, translating something into Korean, and you're living in North Korea that is anti-North Korea, that you could suffer the consequences of that, and that your rights should be protected. And I get that. I don't know that that's what I didn't know if that's what they're talking about or not, because it's so verbose and like lacking in specifics that it just feels like it feels like a bad philosophy paper.
Yes, exactly. Those are two very good examples of things that, like, yes, we should absolutely protect those people's right to work in this particular field, and it's a way of protecting, everyone involved in doing something involved in freedom of expression should be protected, right?
Right.
I feel like that's sort of the angle that they should be going here. It's like we're trying to help authors, period. We should also protect translators who try to bring these things to other places, right? As
Yeah.
protect the publishers, as well as protect, the people who sell these things and distribute these things. Everyone should be protected,
Right.
free
So
from persecution, right? Not. It's just weird to try to focus in on what it means to be censored as a translator. And I think they did try to get in here about it's not like they said this, but it's like if you were having a conversation with these people, they'd be like, "Well, I was not allowed to use this one particular word."
right, right. Yeah, that's fair. Especially, well, the other thing is that this is Europe, and all of our examples are non-European.
Right. Well,
Like,
but you don't know. They could be translating from whatever Belgian into Korean, right?
I guess, but if it's the a council of the European Translators Associations, it's everyone like who's a translator in Macedonia who's translating from Chinese into Macedonian,
I
or
guess that's
or whatever. So they're into those European languages, which maybe makes it a little bit more complicated. But Mike, I had an example or a story and something that's actually a question. Does this not fall under Penn's jurisdiction related to their freedom of speech stuff that they fight for?
would seem right. And I thought that the entire time I was reading it too. Is like Penn does this already, and Penn chooses in much in the same way that a lot of other human rights organizations, like Human Rights Watch, and I'm blanking on the name of the other one. Um, oh my God. Anyway, they choose individual cases
Yeah.
to attack and help with in order to sort of change laws thereafter, right?
Right.
But they have to focus on individual things. They don't just like vaguely argue on the behalf of freedom of expression.
Yeah, I feel like I wouldn't be surprised if looking at Penn's thing, they have something that Penn's website that has some sort of like general statements, but I'm not sure where to find it on here right away.
Right, but those are like founding principles. They still
Right.
require
Yeah.
individual cases to put them into action.
It actually says here's advocating an action. Here's the subjects you can, or the drop down menu: research and resources, focus regions, focus issues, individual cases, news
Yeah.
and analysis, take action.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would make more sense. The other thing I did when I was in Norway, we met with oh shit. Now I don't want to say which press was it. Now I'm blanking out. Oh no. This is all going to die. Aushag, I believe, was the press who it was the guy that's the director, is his dad who was killed for publishing satanic verses.
Oh yeah. Yeah. See, and that's what I'm saying. Like that's clearly a thing that should be addressed. Like being involved in any of this sort of stuff, you should be protected, and there should be, help for those kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That was a crazy moment where like one of the people was like, that's who that is. This magazine too, this e-zine, there were some other things in here that were like a little bit, I mean, I glanced through it. I didn't read it super, super carefully. But there was like two things that seemed of note or interesting to me. There's one that was talking about Macedonian Association of Translators and Interpreters, where their big problem is that the professional Macedonian translators are being undercut by the willingness of employed language professionals to translate literature for a fraction of the recommended cost, which had brought unprecedented drops in translation rates, which I thought that's like a legit problem around the world, I think. But it seemed very stark on there. I also realized during that article that the European Day of Languages is my birthday, which seems nice. But then the other one that stood out, where is it? Okay, so there's this woman I believe I've met before, and I don't want to say her name because it's Dutch and I don't know how to pronounce it correctly. But she, two weird things. One, they include, I don't know if this is her birth date at the beginning, which I feel like you should not do. But it's her name, 1977. So I'm guessing that's her birthday, not like when she started working at this place. But anyway, she just took over as the head of the Amsterdam Translators House, and they asked her about like her problems of like what the challenges they face. So the Amsterdam Translators House is a place in Amsterdam where translators I believe, from Dutch or into Dutch can go and get residencies to work and stay there. I've seen it before. I've seen it one of the times I was in the Netherlands. I don't think I visited it, but we walked by it or we met with someone from there. I vaguely remember it. But anyways, so in 2018, the house hosted 50 translators of 22 nationalities. But, however varied the linguistic background of the visitors, the residents are remarkably similar in age. While most residents are elderly translators who have been in the profession for a long time, young translators starting out are a minority. Quote, the underrepresentation of younger residents is partially due to their personal circumstances, which often don't permit them to leave their homes and jobs for a 1 or 2 month stay, say in Amsterdam, and partly to the present selection criteria at the translator's house, which are easier to meet for experienced translators. We might want to reconsider them. So it was interesting that they're trying to encourage younger translators. And then they go on to say, like, they did a recent survey that half of the translators of Dutch literature are now over 55 years old. Quote, recruiting young translators is one of the biggest challenges, not only in the Netherlands, but all over Europe. Few young people decide to start a career as a literary translator, which I just thought was interesting. Like, that's probably also true here, but I feel like there's more young translators now than ever before. In living in America, anyways, or working in English.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's as time goes on and people want desk jobs, for like 9 to 5 desk jobs, less and less. This becomes, an interesting sort of freelance sort of thing that people view as sort of very like. I don't know what the right term. They find it very attractive because, like, one, you're interacting with different cultures. Maybe you get to travel. You get all these weird little benefits in addition to, like, setting your own hours and working on different things and all of that sort of stuff. I feel like, yeah, more and more it becomes. I mean, all of these things are forgotten. Like, people should really pay attention to how much money that can be made being a translator, because there's not that much. But yeah, I feel like, from the outside, it kind of looks like this glamorous sort of job.
Yeah. That's interesting. Like, I think that the people who have established themselves as full-time freelance translators, even working into English, do tend to be not 55 or older, but they're more experienced. And obviously that makes sense. But there are so many young people who are very energetic and are having a good degree of success, which I think is maybe encouraging.
Right. Yeah.
Speaking of encouraging, we had one last thing we wanted to talk about was your thing that you found that we both read, I think, simultaneously on PW of How Has the Internet Changed Book Culture, which was a panel featuring Emma Straub, Christina Areola, MJ Franklin, and Susie Greenbaum, Jane K. Lee, and Jess Zimmerman. I know only mainly Emma. And Christina, I know, is the head of, like, the books editor for Bustle, but I don't actually know I don't actually know her. I just see her on Twitter. So they talked about the role of the internet in book culture.
Yeah, okay, all right. 3 paragraphs down here. The major takeaway, it was that all the panelists believe that the internet has served to expand literary culture and its reach. Straub described literary activity on the web as a, quote, good cocktail party where it's always busy and you're not the only one there, end quote. Great. That's helpful. So we could go on and on. Like, there's not a whole lot here. I mean,
I thought there was less than 0 here. Like, I was surprised that they squeezed an article out of this. Like, this is some solid reporting, because, like, I would have choked on this if I had to cover this. I would have fucked it up.
They do seem to think that, like, negative book reviews are a waste of time, but other than that, they just sort of say that, like, yeah, basically the internet has connected people that wouldn't otherwise be connected, and it's expanded literary culture's connectivity, even if, like, we've talked about this before, literary culture is not bigger than it was before the internet.
No.
Like, that's just not a thing. It's just easier for us to talk to each other about the things that we read than it was 20 years ago.
It's easier to produce anxiety and envy.
Right. I'm glad we didn't talk about bookstagrammers. That's a good thing. Because, goddamn.
They do mention that Instagram's their favorite outlet. This part I think was interesting, though. The personal touch sometimes takes some of the critical edge out of books conversation online. Like many outlets, Bustle is phasing out professional book reviews, and Electric Literature did away with its reviews a couple of years ago now, Zimmerman said. Instead, these websites are prioritizing personal essays from a diverse group of writers, and both of the aforementioned sites have a women-focused editorial strategy.
Yeah, there's no more criticism. This is true.
No. And personal essay, I feel like, that's basically all I write on our website. They're like under ideas of like thinking about book culture or about translation or about publishing. But I mean, they're essentially just personal takes on that. So I'm not opposed to that, but like it's a shift. It's a big shift. And I'll bet you so if everything goes in cycles, whoever around 2025 already has a fully set up website that's all very solid book reviews and very clear criticism is going to win the next round of this shift. When the pendulum comes back and people are into that instead of hearing everyone's same fairly similar personal essays about fairly similar topics, they're going to like be deep into that. So whoever can get that going and get that all set up, you will win the next round of the internet.
Yes, I agree with that. It's I don't know. I wish there was something positive to look forward to with the internet in relation to book culture, but I feel like it's only going to get worse.
There's not a lot that I try to stay off of Twitter as much as possible, unless it's like just to promote something, or if I'm really bored, or like just like I say this and I know that I flip through it and like there's a few people that I pay attention to, but they're not for like positive reinforcement. They're more just because I need to see what's happening. But otherwise, I just think I find it gross and horrible. And I don't think that there's any part of that book culture that I really am looking forward to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I feel like the way we could all improve book culture would be to get off the internet.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm again, very grateful for being able to connect and talk to people online, very easily about books. But it's still much more valuable to me as a human being to do so in person, to do so more thoughtfully with one person. I feel like, the creation of all these, like what you were saying, anxiety sort of inducing platforms and spaces where things are discussed and where language gets homogenized and all of those sorts of things. It's very not good, I would say, for writing and for culture in general. Everyone agrees that Twitter is awful, and yet we all fucking are using Twitter all the time. And
everyone's moving to the Instagram. Everyone's moving to Instagram, which my Instagram feed makes no sense. Which is fine.
Got rid of it, and I find it. I look at riffraffs like once a week, and I find it just horribly anxiety-inducing, and just shut it immediately.
There used to be that old saying, like, you're always 2 fuck-ups away from bankruptcy as an independent publisher. I wonder if now you're always like 2 tweets away from being canceled.
Right. Yeah.
Which feels so much more dangerous.
Yeah.
But, man, I don't know. The only other thing I was going to plug here is not meant to be self-indulgent, but it's an interesting thing. I saw an email or saw a tweet. I don't know where I saw this. Someone forwarded it to me, an email that there's a reading and translation is starting a new series called Translators on Books That Should Be Translated, in which translators are pitching new books that they think should be translated. And it stems from a line in the article I wrote for Vulture last month that was said that based on just generally the number of countries in the world, the number of books that are produced, and like if X number of them from each country is decent, there should be around 1,500 titles a year that publishers could be translating into English that are worthwhile.
1,500?
Yeah, maximum.
Oh.
Or I say minimum, but I don't think that I meant minimum. I think I meant maximum. That like there's including all the books from French, all the books. So there's 600 and some right now. So if you triple that number, there's probably that many available that could be translated that would reasonably, that you could reasonably, are worthwhile of translation. That's the way to put it. Not that the business will support them, none of that part. Just that like in sheer terms of cultural output, there are 1,500 books a year from around the world that could get translated because of their quality.
Okay.
And so they're going to try and highlight as many of those as possible on this column. So if you follow reading and translation, I don't know if it has a separate section or not because I can't click on it, but it's called Translators on Books That Should Be Translated. They got one up there right now. Came out in 2018. Silvio Perala's Lojo Para, and it's reviewed by Enrica Maria Ferreira. And then it has just information about that book. It's basically like a short reader's report / review of a international book that has not been translated. It's pretty long, actually, from Italian. But they're starting this. So for anyone who's I don't know, these lists come out every so often from places that are like books that should be translated, or Penn used to come out with a list like this. And they're for places that people are looking for stuff. This isn't a bad place to look, especially if you're looking for things that aren't comes up in our bonus episode a little bit. But if you're looking for books that aren't being agented, that won't be put into auctions, and that you won't be bidding against other presses that are bigger than you, trying to find that new inefficiency where you can get something cheap that's really good, this is going to be a good option for people if they continue it, which I assume they're going to do it at least for a while. 1,500 is a lot of books to cover, guys. You don't take words I say literally. Ever.
Yeah. But yeah, that is a good resource. I agree. I mean, for small presses, who can't afford to go in to New York and meet all the representatives that come over and do all that sort of thing. Yeah.
Just aren't involved in that. Like, how many presses? I mean,
there's translators starting out.
Yeah. And a translator putting a pitch on here might actually be helpful. I mean, it's supposed to be all translators writing these. So it might be something that leads to a breakthrough. I mean, if people use it, I mean, there are other resources, obviously. Words Without Borders, asked into various places that are covering semi-similar ground. But it's kind of unique to do it book by book in this way. I mean, I'm down for it. I felt like when I first saw this, I was like, oh no, does this mean I'm going to get 1,500 pitches sent to my inbox because I said this in an article? It wasn't even the focus of the article. And then I read it and was like, okay, good. For a second there, I thought that this was going to go very sideways. But if there are 200 and some, there's about, I think it was 170 presses published a book in translation last year. There are 7 to 10 that we talk about on a regular basis, and probably 25 maximum that are included in most major conversations or pitches. So there's a whole bunch of people are finding stuff that are outside of the ways that we generally focus on, because we're talking about new directions in Europa and transit and whatever. And those people this might be a huge benefit for them. They have a much better, wider range of information to access that but with translator right there helping them. So I think it's overall a really good initiative. I have nothing to say. It's just, I feel sort of embarrassed by it, but also I think it's cool.
Cool. So how can someone like me see this thing?
Go to readingandtranslation.com, and then it should be one of the top subjects there. Reading. I'll link to it. I have it on my phone, and that's why I can't see how it works.
That should be translated. All right.
Yep, right there. Translators on books that should be translated. First thing. So, and I think there's actually a call for people who want to submit things. I think there's a way that you can submit books if you want to contribute something to that.
Yep.
Probably under Write for Us. But yeah, there you go. Cool. I've got nothing else. I don't think.
I don't either. I'm sort of frantic these days because we're about to head out on a very short vacation. We're going to a wedding out of state. So, nice. Yeah, we're running around like chickens with our head cut off yesterday and today.
After a 10-hour or 11-hour both-way train ride to Chicago and back, and then a trip to Buffalo last night and back this morning, I am not going anywhere until July 10th. So,
2 weeks.
But then that's vacation. I'm good with that. That'll be fun.
I did want to point out something relevant here. Article 24 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is the following: everyone has the right to rest and leisure, including reasonable limitation of working hours and periodic holidays with pay.
Fuck yeah. I'm down. I want Fridays to be a holiday. I want Fridays to be just not a working day anymore.
Do you not do summer hours?
Yeah, we do, but let's not talk about that on this official podcast.
All right.
Okay.
Forget it. All right.
Yeah, we abide by all the rules that we are governed by. But yeah, I think that for everyone, not just me, not just publishing people, Friday should be a day off. And we should be having 4-day work weeks, period.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know it doesn't work.
I mean, France has a 35-hour work week now.
France has like a 4-hour work week from the publishing industry.
This is true. Well, they value other things.
I mean, they're closed for now until like, I don't know, Frankfurt. So yeah, pretty cool.
No, like I said, they value other things, and I admire them.
Yep, I can agree with that. Okay, I gotta go because I gotta go do another one of these podcasts. Check us out on all the normal places. Rate us, review us. There's a bonus episode right before this one in which I talk about baseball and publishing sabermetrics, which was very fun, and with Ben Lindbergh of The Ringer and Effectively Wild and the MVP Machine. And it was actually some for people who don't like the sports stuff. The baseball stuff is pretty normal because it's about ideas of advancement, and then it transitions into how publishing works and the sort of shocking things about that happened with his book. Not shocking, but like I think people who are just here for the book stuff, you're going to get something out of it if you listen to the whole thing, especially after the first 12 minutes, and then it gets funny again. But anyways, that's on there. I'm off. I will talk to you in 2 weeks.
Sounds good.
We are prisoners here in our own way. How can you live life under impossible weights? I wanna watch the sea rise, I wanna watch the flood come and wash it all away. I've been in motion from the second I could leave this place. All the people here are strangers to me now, and you'll feel the motion.